Hi, this is the a16z podcast. This is Chris Dixon. I'm here today with Blake Masters, who's the co-author of a new book called 0 to 1, and his co-author is Peter Thiel. And this came out of a class Peter taught at Stanford, which Blake wrote about and or blogged about rather, and it became very popular. I know I read it all, and I think blogged about it and tweeted about it. So it's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just talk about some of the big themes of the book. I know there's sort of competition, monopolies versus commodities. It's one big theme. There's this idea of sort of having a secret for your startup idea. There's the idea of sort of power laws existing as, in venture capital and startups. Maybe can you kind of explain some of these ideas?
Yeah, the biggest macro theme in the book is the distinction that we draw between technology and globalization. So 0 to 1, the title of the book, that's the shorthand for going from nothing and creating something, going from 0 to 1. And that's the single word for that we say is technology. In contrast, you have 1 to N, copying something that already works. That's globalization. And so the whole book is a call to do new things on the theory that technology is not just gadgets. It's not just nice to haves that could make the future better. Actually, the future is going to be radically better than what we have now, or it's going to be radically worse, and that's going to hinge on the question of whether we can develop new technology.
So the idea is we've gotten good at globalization at 1 to N, but we, in the process, neglected the 0 to 1. Is that kind of
exactly? They're both progress. So it's like when everyone hopes for a future of progress, but we really need to distinguish between these two modes, kind of spreading old ways of creating wealth everywhere and then doing new things. So if you look at before World War I, the world was, from maybe the mid-19th century to World War I, there was lots of globalization, lots of trade, also lots of technological development. Then you have World War I, and you get from maybe 1914 to Kissinger in China, you get a tremendous amount of technological development, but not much globalization. And since the early 70s, we think there's been tons of globalization and limited progress in technology. Almost all that progress has been confined to IT, which of course we know all about in Silicon Valley.
What is the theory as to why? This is sort of connects to Peter's venture fund, who has a famous sort of saying that we asked for flying cars and all we got were 140 characters, referring to social networks and things. What in your view and Peter's view is the theory as to why there's been so much progress in bits and not in atoms, or in computer science and not in the real world stuff? Or whatever?
Well, the libertarian answer, of course, is just
regulation.
Regulation. Any hacker can go and get stuff done. It's actually really hard to manipulate the world of atoms because you have to deal with people, regulators who know something about that. They know what it looks like. It's a convenient answer. It probably doesn't explain everything. There's probably a certain path to.
It's also things like Moore's law, for example. I mean, it's not every area where you have this incredible exponential improvement.
It would be really hard actually to improve global food production in any sort of exponential way that resembles Moore's law. But we also so there's something singular about the computer business. There's something singular about the last 40 years in IT. And at the same time, the more that goes, we run the risk of just sort of conflating progress with computers and kind of stopping demanding it in all these other contexts.
Yep. Okay, so what are some of the other big themes?
One of the biggest sort of sub-themes is the distinction between competition and monopoly in business. So kind of Americans mythologize competition. We really, really like it. We sort of conflate it with free market capitalism and political discussions. And so politicians come out and say, oh, I'm all in favor of competition. But the theory on this is actually competition is distracting in business. In a perfectly competitive business, sort of in Econ 101 textbooks, competition means that nobody makes any economic profit. Your profits are competed away. You're a homogenous supplier of goods. Actually, the most successful businesses make a lot of money, and they do that by doing something that no one else can do.
It's funny because Michael Porter, the Harvard strategist, says strategy is the art and science of making your industry less competitive and therefore higher profit margins, right?
Right.
I mean, they're in. You're right. I agree. They're in direct opposition, right? Competition and margins.
And it's interesting. So yeah, a lot of what we say in the book, it's not always novel ideas, but sometimes it's just what we think is like a useful rhetorical shift.
Sure, yeah.
So Porter talks a lot about competitive edges.
Yeah.
What's your competitive edge? But even that bias, there's a linguistic bias there. Pro-competition, or Clay Christensen talks about disruption. And so startups have gone around talking about how good it is to disrupt things. Actually, disruption is a term very much anchored in the vantage point of like bigger firms. The book was written for bigger firms as to how to avoid, threats from these technology startups. So we say like, don't disrupt, don't compete. Think about like what unique and valuable things you can do, and then go do them. And of course, that's any successful industry is going to attract competition. But it's almost like the moment you focus on your competitors, you're going to lose sight of the big opportunity in front of you.
So the specific advice to entrepreneurs is don't create the nth social network. Go and do like Elon Musk style, like SpaceX, electric cars, things where you can be the only one who's doing it in sort of a modern Silicon Valley style or something.
Exactly. And the pushback to this, so people say, we say don't create the nth social network, and people love to point out, Zuckerberg, came after Friendster. He created an nth social network, and that's true in a technical sense. And yet, Facebook worked in a way that Friendster didn't. So then there's the question of why did he just merely take the idea that already existed and sort of iterate on it in this agnostic process? He didn't, right? He didn't focus on the competition. As soon as he knew he had something at Harvard, right, there was a long-term plan then that they set in motion. And so it's not about necessarily being first, right? The first mover advantage can be a good tactic, but what you really want to do is ignore competition and figure out how you can be the last mover in any industry, how you can define it. You never want to be like a competitive player in social networking. You want to be the company that defines social networking.
It's interesting. Sometimes I hear people say it's a similar idea, which is sometimes harder ideas are easier. I saw this. We were investors. Actually, Founders Fund was too, I think, in Oculus as an example. And it's interesting what I saw. I was on the board there and I got to observe it, which is you sort of go out, you plant a flag, you say, I'm building virtual reality. And then all of these interesting people who have been thinking about the problem for years had never had a home all kind of came together, right? And you sort of ended up with a talent monopoly. And I have no connection to the Elon Musk companies, but I've heard the similar things happened at SpaceX and Tesla.
If you want to go make rockets, there's one place to go.
That's right. If you're like the smartest rocket person and you're tired of dealing with government bureaucracy, like they all went there, is my understanding, right? And so that, in a weird way, like it's harder, but then by doing it, it sort of inspires all of the best people to come potentially to come join you.
And I think that's the only way that if you're a startup, that's the only way that you're going to, you're not going to be able to pay as much as Google or Facebook at this point, and that's the only way to attract people.
Yeah,
probably.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's something that was sort of counterintuitive. I never would have understood it until I kind of got to observe some of it myself and see how it works. What are some of the other big ideas in the book?
Another big idea, kind of in the investment context, or at least we use VC to explain it, is the power law. The idea that some things are just radically less equal than others. There's radical, unequal distributions.
So power law is sort of exponential growth, whether it be in the value of a company or the value of an asset like a VC portfolio, things like this, right?
So it's a tricky chapter to explain because everybody sort of feels like they've already internalized this. Obviously, people kind of think like things are unequal. I know things are unequal. Not everything's purely equal. But the claim is just like however unequal you think things are, it can actually be much more stark than that. So if you look at Facebook's valuation compared to all these other members of the so-called unicorn club, I think TechCrunch did like a bar graph, and it's staggering. It's staggeringly valuable relative to even like very, very successful companies.
This is power law is sort of the outside way to describe what happened. Inside of the mechanism usually is some kind of what they would call a cumulative advantage or rich get richer effect or something like this. Like internally, there's an effect that happens where the successful company gets even more successful.
It compounds. You get runaway growth. And so the idea is we think it's sort of universally applicable outside the investment context. So many decisions you face in life appear to be equal. Should I stay in Silicon Valley or should I move home, to live with my parents after college? It'd be sort of nice to be at home. Maybe things really are equal a lot of the times, but I think the power law is a useful device because if you know it exists, merely sort of injecting that possibility that things could be radically unequal into your thinking is going to help you kind of think about everything from an outsider's perspective, and hopefully you can stumble on the really valuable
It's
path.
very hard to think that way, though, right? I mean, isn't there? It's sort of like you're trained in so many other contexts to think of things in kind of this linear, like, let me do the thing that's more prudent as opposed to let me do this thing that has, like, just to give you an example, like, I think the basic mistake that entrepreneurs make when they're pitching VCs is they kind of pitch that they're likely to succeed as opposed to pitching that there's a small chance they'll be mega successful.
Totally.
Right? Which is sort of counterintuitive. Like,
Yeah.
of course you're going to walk in and say this is going to succeed, right?
Yeah, it doesn't
As
feel good to
opposed
say we'll probably fail, but
right.
on the 10% chance we don't.
That's right. And so, but the reality is, like, nobody, like, once you do the investing for a while and you kind of internalize the power law stuff, you don't, like, if you pass on a company where, okay, maybe they'll be successful, you don't stay up at night thinking about that. If you pass on the company that there's a 1% chance at the next Google and people are going to talk about this story for the next 30 years, like, there are still lots of stories about the people that passed on Facebook and Google, and
right.
That's what bothers you, right? And
right.
so flipping it around, the entrepreneur wants to pitch that little possibility that it's going to be the next big thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's incredibly unintuitive.
Yeah.
As a mode of thinking. I mean, you see this every day as a professional investor, and even in that context, it's probably still hard. So for like the non-investment professional, I think it's just like staggeringly hard. But the idea behind that chapter is just to remind people that these sort of distributions exist. If you don't see them every day, it's because you're not looking for them, not because they don't exist.
And so another big idea is this idea of secrets, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So people have talked about this. A lot of people say, like, what's your edge? What's your competitive advantage? Again, to go back to Porter a little bit. Similar concept, just reframed. I think when you ask what a competitive edge is, you can get like myopically focused on what other people are doing and how you're a little bit different, and maybe some sort of like micro truth that that they don't. When you come out and declare that, like, hey, secrets exist and every great business is built on a secret, I think it just shifts the conversation towards a more, taking a more ambitious tilt. So the idea is there are hard truths out there. We can find them, but they're not easy. There's
what's an example?
An example we give in the book is Andrew Wiles proving Fermat's last theorem. Didn't really change the world in a non-academic sense, but it was a really important discovery because for 300 years, no one really had succeeded at this, and yet he thought it was possible, right? So it's like if you see people fail for 300 years and you just assume that, like, that's not possible, you'll never even try. And so the idea is there's hard problems out there. We can solve them. Going to Mars would be an example. Like, a lot of people probably think it's impossible. They think Elon's destined to fail.
But I thought a secret, though, is you believe something that no one else or very few people.
So his secret would be like, I can build a company that goes to Mars by 2020, right? Not like so there's like academic secrets,
And the idea is every great business is founded on a secret. Is that right?
Yeah. So you look at like. I guess you look at all the delivery startups right now. Some are really succeeding. The secret there is, like, that was a good idea. Didn't work in the 90s for all these reasons, but, like, that's a good idea. And the secret is, like, now it's a good idea and you can make the logistics work.
How do you get a secret if you're an entrepreneur?
Well, you have to be, I think you sort of have to be weird, and you have to be, like, looking. You have to be looking for secrets, and you have to be sort of a strange person, because the average person does not do that. It's much... all of society basically runs on convention, right? Like, you have to interact with other people in all these conventional ways, and that can sound like pejorative just because we don't like the word conventional, but actually that's how society runs. It's how it functions. But how it moves forward, I think, is when the small minority of people who are sort of strange enough and interesting enough to look for secrets actually care to and find it. So it's like we say that every company is a conspiracy to change the world. And, like, when you bring someone on, you can recruit someone if you can successfully convince them that your secret is valuable and that you can pull it off.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really fascinating idea. I think of it as sort of, there's different classes of secrets. There's like academic, like you might have a computer science thesis, a secret. You might have gone, whatever, you did a PhD at Stanford and you now have a secret that networking can be done through software, not hardware, or something like this, right? And then there could be maybe like cultural secrets, like maybe Airbnb, arguably, like it's that this generation wants to go and explore the world and sleep on each other's couches, and it's just different, right?
Yep.
So I sort of think of it as like there's like, and then maybe there's an industry secret. Like, I worked in fashion for 10 years, and I have this deep insight. I don't know. I think it's a really interesting idea, and I actually use it as a way, like on a first meeting. My view is, as a VC, you can't really evaluate somebody's idea if it's a good idea in 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever. And that instead you kind of look for things like, does this person have a plausible background to have earned a secret, right? Right. Like, did this person spend, like, in some ways you got to earn it, right? And you don't typically just walk down the street and boink, you get hit by a secret, right? Like, you have to, like, have spent time doing something different. You were off in some other country, in some other industry, doing some research or something to see the world differently.
Yeah. I'm not a professional investor, but I think it's a good sign if I left a pitch meeting, having just been pitched, saying that person believes something really weird that I'm not on board with yet. But man, they really believe it, Because
you're also, like, part of the story in a startup has to be why hasn't Apple, I want to build a phone that has better battery life. Well, great. Well, so does everybody. Like, and they have tens of billions of dollars. Are you really going to do it better versus a secret, which is, hey, this is why everyone overlooked it.
Yeah, the way we open the book is with what Peter calls his contrarian question: what valuable truth does no one agree with you on?
Which he says he likes to ask as an interview question.
Question. Yeah. So you hear some funny answers, but it's actually really tough. The business.
So what valuable truth do you believe that no one agrees with?
Well, and then here's the whole catch. Paul Graham has an essay. What you're not allowed to say or what you can't say.
I see.
So you have to be careful.
So you have certain beliefs which you think are things you can't say.
Well, probably everyone should, because if you
some like libertarian political thing or something.
Sure. I mean, everyone should, because if you're comfortable telling, like, everything you know or think to be true on a podcast, then it actually literally means, like, you have purely conventional beliefs.
Yeah.
What would be my quick answer?
Do you have any socially acceptable
socially acceptable answer?
Come on, I can't be the first person who has this.
No, it just shows it's a tricky question.
Tough question. Yeah.
I think Silicon Valley is, like, really culturally important. I think a lot of people would agree with that. So maybe it's a bad answer because it violates the presumption that no one agrees with it. But I think it's going to be a lot more important in the future. I think.
Do you think people are underestimating the importance to the degree to which it will be important?
I do, and it's risky to say because it can be easy to sound, like Silicon Valley technologists are smug.
Where do you think? Do you think, like, some people think, okay, there was the '90s bubble and now we're having the second bubble, or is this like, no, it's like more like the Gartner hype cycle where you had a bubble and it fell and now it's going to be the next 50 years of
probably more the latter.
Yeah.
Probably more the latter. I mean, it's hard. I mean, from my casual perspective, things can seem a little frothy, but at the same time, if you're optimistic, I think you have to be bullish on Silicon Valley because we need new technology, and it's not like technology only comes from Silicon Valley, or that everybody needs to be like us. I don't know if it was you or Mark who tweeted, we need like 50 Silicon Valleys. We need like a Silicon Valley in Detroit.
Mark has a view. He calls it, like, you need Drone Valley. You need
Drone Valley,
Bitcoin,
right?
Bitcoin Canyon.
Bitcoin Canyon. All these versions, but
well, I think, and his point is, though, that you need to get it. Don't try to go head to head against Silicon Valley on operating systems or something, right? Like, go differentiate yourself, including, I think he agrees with your kind of regulatory view that, like, including through regulatory changes, right? Like, if San Francisco is not going to be friendly to drones, maybe Utah can be or something, and that can give them some edge, especially as we apparently are moving into an era in which we're more about atoms and bits.
Right. So I'm incredibly bullish on technology because I think we have to be if we're going to have any good future at all. It's almost unbearable to contemplate, being bearish on it.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, congratulations on the book. I have to say, like, I think there's probably only a handful of business books worth reading, and this is definitely one of them. So everyone who's interested in technology and startups should definitely read it. So
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.